Good morning, everyone. Apologies if I sound a bit croaky. This is my second conference in a week. I was at FOSDEM at the weekend, so I'm starting to flag a little bit now. So I'm Tim Telford, CTO of Devtank Limited. We're a test and measurement company based in the Midlands, and we do open hardware, open software, and open data solutions. And I'm joined here by Bruno.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Bruno Gallotta. I'm part of the University of Derby. I'm a researcher within sustainable operations, sustainable supply chains, and of course that now I'm working towards the digitalization and the usages within the industry to reduce carbon emissions through the gains on productivity.
Okay, and the talk today is about our journey to net zero and how we start that journey by intelligent monitoring, and in particular open source monitoring solutions, which is the work we've been doing with the University of Derby. So just a quick agenda, talk a bit about the company and other things that we're doing. I'll talk about the OpenSmartMonitor brand and the product, university introduction, the motivation behind why we're doing what we're doing, what can we measure with our hardware, and a bit of a live demo, hopefully, and some case studies, and then where next. So who are we? Well, like I said, we're a small business based in the Midlands. We've been doing test and measurement solutions for about 8 years now. I'm ex-Rolls-Royce Aerospace, used to work for some big corporations, and eventually I saw the light and realised that there's a better way of designing products, and we're very much into open source solutions for business, for the business sector. And disruptive technologies where we see ourselves ideally placed. We do IoT, production test, and automation type services and solutions. And we're prolific users of open source tool chains, so we use open source tools to develop open products, which is quite unique in the marketplace. There are other companies doing it, but not that many that I know of, and especially not that many doing hardware and software. So just a quick lineup there of our products. So the one on the left is our Hilltop, which is based around the Raspberry Pi. We're also Raspberry Pi design partners. So that's a modular platform for production test, hardware in the loop applications, and general test and control type applications that you might have in a laboratory or production environment. We do test modules that plug into that chassis. OpenSmartMonitor, which is what I'm here to talk about today, and then we do production test jigs as well. So a large part of our business is helping other companies test their volume products, whether that be open or closed, but all our solutions are open. So the brand that we've been building for the last couple of years is OpenSmartMonitor, and the diagram at the bottom there just gives you a quick sort of infographic of how it works. So this particular product uses the LoRaWAN protocol, and we send data wirelessly. It's environmental and energy monitoring data. We send that to a gateway. It can be any kind of LoRaWAN device or public infrastructure gateway that's already available for you to use. And then we use an open stack. So we're using InfluxDB and Chirp Stack, Grafana. You can see there, we're not about reinventing the wheel. We're about taking the best of what's out there already on the marketplace, bringing it all together under one roof, and making a solution that people really want. And that's the power of open source. So I'll move on to yourself, Bruno.
Thank you, Tim. So just talking very briefly about the University of Derby and the work that we have been doing in there. Just to explain, of course, that whenever we talk about the university, we're not only talking only about teaching, but also there are some other elements that are very important for the university. So they are aspects related to funding, but also research and innovation, training and development, talent and recruitment, and facilities and networks. And that was pretty much how I found Tim and Devtank overall. So we've been working together for about 4 years now, almost 5, I guess. And I was part of a project called the ERDF Decarbonize Project, which was aimed to reduce the carbon emissions from companies around the East Midlands region. And then we met each other and we saw that there was a potential for some projects together to support local SMEs, which we will detail further on. Just a little bit in the focus of research and innovation, which I think is quite important and quite relevant to the audience of this particular conference here today. The university focus not only on the business improvement, but also in sustainable and clean growth, supply chain improvement, and of course data science as well. Again, some of those topics are quite relevant to the discussions that we had over the last few days. So just to explain a little bit about the main purpose of the project and the main ideas of the project, of course that, as we know, recession, it comes in waves. As we can see there, the small, this cartoon actually illustrates that, because we do have that small wave that came with COVID-19. Of course, before that, we had a bit of another wave that came after Brexit, also mixing together. And then what we are observing now with also the actual and the current Russian situation, we have seen a big change in a lot of things. So a lot of things have been changing over the last few years. So we know that the prices of electricity, gas, and pretty much everything has just skyrocketed. And we know that things will only get worse. And I'm sorry, because this is the sad part of the presentation, and everyone just gets very demotivated at this time. But what we are here to say is that it's very important that we know what is the problem, but also we know what are some possible solutions. I'm not going to say that they are the actual solutions, because of course with those things, changes in technologies, they might occur and change the status. But of course that we have an idea on what we can do to reduce that. And in order to solve some of those challenges, and more specifically around climate change, we know that the UK has a clear strategy to reduce the carbon emissions and has the targets to reduce it by 2050. But in order to do that, we need to improve efficiency. And I think everything that we're talking about today, we're talking about efficiency gains, because if a company gains some sorts of efficiency, it starts wasting more, it starts wasting energy, wasting heat, and so on. So those are actually very good ways for a company to respond on that. Basically, this is just an overview about the companies here in the UK. And to me, as a researcher, it's very sad, because whenever we see a big change and a big development, especially talking about carbon emissions, we tend to always see larger companies and large corporations talking about that. But what is really sad is that in the UK, the SMEs, they are 99% of the businesses across the country. So for me, it's just a bit illogical that we will achieve net zero if the companies that represent most of the companies, they are not in the same boat. Because the SMEs, they represent about 50% of the business emissions across the country. And if we think about in the European Union, they represent 70% of the industrial pollutants. So, of course, that they are big players, and the needs to change for the SMEs. And again, as I've mentioned before, this is some data from Make UK from September last year. Pretty much at that time, the energy costs were seen as causing one of the catastrophic disruption around businesses. And this data is from the UK. But also some other aspects, for instance, about material costs and also materials availability. It's important to mention that this is from September last year, because as we know, the prices of energy, so not only electricity but also gas, has been changing quite constantly. So if we took a picture of those figures today, this might be a little bit different. So probably the energy cost is going to be a bit more blue than it is. And it's quite worrying, specifically if we think about the SME scenarios. And if we think about the SMEs, they tend to have more problems with this changing situation. So yeah.
Okay. So talk a little about the hardware now, as this is a hardware track. So what can we measure? So with one device, we tried to design something that is a bit of a jack of all really, and one box, lots of tricks. So it can do electricity and gas via external connectivity to M-Bus or RS485 Modbus type devices. We also have CAN bus on there for tapping into existing systems that you might have in a factory or a building. Water, we can get these flow meters for water and gas that we tap into and connect to this. Internally, it's got air quality, temp, humidity. Air quality is a really important parameter for many businesses and workplaces. Light levels and sound levels, again, very useful, good for HSE, legislation, that kind of thing. So there's a picture there of a typical Modbus meter that you might get in a building, and we can tap into those and daisy chain them together and get lots of data wirelessly to our dashboard. And you can see all that in real time. Now, this is just a quick overview of the hardware. So this board was designed in KiCad, one of the many open source tools that we use. Fantastic package. If any of you used it already, you'll know. So double-sided board. The brains of this particular device is the STM L4 series microprocessor. Like everyone else, we've had issues getting hold of parts in the last couple of years, and we've had to redesign several times, which has been very painful. Changed a few of the sensors there. So we've got MEMS microphone, particle sensor. You can see there, wireless module is an off-the-shelf rack wireless module that has the LoRaWAN protocol built into its stack. And then we've got external inputs for CT clamps as well, current transducers. So you can clamp around cables and monitor up to one channel of free phase or individual single phase circuits, depending on what you want to monitor. And this is all published under the CERN open hardware license that we use for all of our hardware designs. And there's some references at the end where you can go and have a look. They're on GitHub. You can have a look at the designs yourself if you're interested. So live dashboards, what's it all about then? Why are we bothering? Well, the real thing is to get finger on the pulse data and insights into what's going on, right? Get some feedback. You can see the costs. You can see the carbon emissions, how much energy you're using per day, per week, that kind of thing. Business insights. You can set up trips and alarms. So Grafana's fantastic. It's very easy to set up alarms and alerts. So get it to automatically email you if parameter goes outside of a tolerance or spec. And machine utilization and machine efficiency is where we've done a lot of work in smart factory applications. Got some great case studies to present shortly on that. So quick live demo if it works. I'll just have a little look at our data from our office. We've also got sensors set up here in the building, and we'll be doing a mini report on our findings after this event. So this is just from our office, just to give you a quick overview of typical data. Let me just zoom out. It's very large for some reason. That's time range. So you can go back as far as you like, really. You can go back several days or hours. Let's go back one day. And let's just put let's go 2 days. There we go, that's better. So these are the kind of graphs and traces you typically see on one of our dashboards. So in the office back in Derby, we're looking at hot and cold water, energy, current. This is the current on our main incoming feed into the building. Humidity, temperature. We're looking at the loft temperature as well to see how good our insulation is. Obviously, cost is very important for any business. We want to see how much it's costing us to run the premises. Not too bad at the moment, it could be worse. And CO2 emissions, obviously very important. So just a quick overview there of a typical dashboard. And I don't know, some of you will be familiar with Grafana already. Let's just have a look, see if there's any more. No. Yeah, it's for some reason. There we go. There we go. There's another view. That's better. So internal temp, loft temp, sound levels, humidity. It's just useful to have this data. And what we did find over Christmas is that we had a water leak. Just saw some pulses all through the night, basically, very small pulses of water flow and consumption there on the water. And traced it down to one of the toilets in the building was leaking. So little things like that, make a big difference over a year or several years. I'll go back to my slide pack now. Okay. Flick through, find where we are. Okay. So, some case studies now then. Let's talk about the work we've been doing in the region. So, a big part of what we're doing is to make traditional businesses smarter. The picture there is a textile company in Derby. It's in an old Rolls-Royce factory. And this is typical for the region. You see lots of traditional businesses making products. Some of the machines date back to Victorian days. And I'm not kidding there, they really are very old machines. And they kept them going and maintain these machines for many years. And what we're doing is we're trying to improve efficiency and drive down the running costs of those businesses. We're trying to survey what's going on in the environment, see if there's a better way of controlling those assets and that environment that they're working in, that workplace, and really try and make improvements by looking at the data and getting insights from the data. This is a case study. Bruno, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I can just talk very briefly about this one. So this Superior Wellness was one of the SMEs that we supported as part of the ERDF Decarbonize project. In total, we were able to support, I think, 6 companies. Initially, we were supposed to only be supporting 3, but of course, we were able to find some additional funding to support more companies. As Tim was describing, a lot of the companies pretty much in our region, they are with very old heritage buildings, which is simply a characteristic about the region, which is fine. Something that I find interesting as a researcher with experience in operations management and sustainable supply chains is the very nature of the businesses and the very nature of the industries that were placed in those buildings. Because if we think back then, more years ago, most of the companies that used to be part in there, they were heavy users of energy and heavy consumers of electricity overall. So the power factor, which is pretty much the voltage that they have, was quite high. However, those businesses, they moved countries because now the UK doesn't have many more of those traditional manufacturing companies. Mainly the picture that we have here in the UK nowadays are more companies that focus either on assembly or distribution. And those activities, they require way less energy than the production. The reason that I'm saying this is that this changes a lot because the work that Tim and the guys, they did with a few companies, one of the main impacts that they had was the identification of the power factor and changing the power factor, which means the voltage that those companies are receiving. And simply by doing that and simply by adjusting that, it already saved the companies a lot of not only money, but also carbon emissions, because in the end, that was the main objective of that. There was actually one company that was able to save about, I think it was about 25 or 30% of their electricity consumption. And again, we're thinking about only one company in the UK, but if we scale up to all the other companies that might be in a similar situation, then we start seeing the impact of this type of project. And again, Superior Wellness was one of those examples. Because they were a distributor of hot tubs around Chesterfield. And the electricity bills that they were having, they were massive. So of course, some changes were needed, and now they are doing a little bit better.
Yeah. Fundamentally, the infrastructure for that business was set up for a much larger org that's doing heavy manufacturing, and they were no longer using the building for heavy manufacturing. So some big changes it had to make to the building infrastructure. So this one here is a job we did for JCB, who are based just up the road from our property, our business. and they had a paint quality issue. They've got an eco paint line, which is a series of dip tanks in the factory. So you can imagine a big cab from the vehicle that they dip into various stages of different solutions. Ultimately, it gets coated in like a protective paint layer, different colours, you name it. There's preservatives in there. So it's a multi-stage plant, and there's some anodes that are inside the tank, and they were having issues where they were failing. They didn't know what was going on. They could monitor the total current from all the anodes inside the tank, but they couldn't measure the individuals. So we set about sort of doing a bespoke solution for them based on this kind of core technology here, the OSM product. Monitored all the anodes, and on day one we installed it, turned it on, and sure enough there's an anode not working, or there's data missing from one of the anodes. So very quickly sort of paid for itself, and demonstrated the need for smart monitoring. So that was quite insightful for them, and we gave them a Grafana dashboard. They could see it all in real time, and they've got TV screens around the factory. They've got the visual factory thing going on, so they can now see when there's a problem very quickly and address it. We've done some other work for JCB as well along the similar lines, but all of that adds to efficiency improvements, cost savings, energy reduction, and energy reduction being a really key point. That directly obviously leads to cost savings anyway. So a bit about a project we launched off with Innovate UK and Pragmatic last year. So I think Rob Taylor mentioned Pragmatic in a slide pack yesterday on chip flow. They're a great company. They did some really innovative work on flexible semiconductors, and they're building a state-of-the-art factory in Durham in the north of England. And we were delighted to be awarded a project with them to support on sensorization. So OSM here, this product will be going into the factory, planning to build hundreds of these sensors and monitor all the individual machine tools and various stages of the plant, clean rooms. They're building state-of-the-art clean rooms to do the manufacturing in, and they're very into open source tech. And this is not a small business. They are quite a fast-growing company with lots of seed funding. So that's a good one for us and for the open source community in general. So we're monitoring things like compressed air and vacuum pressure, lots of different types of gases, N2O2, CO2. Their whole ethos is about just good enough manufacturing. So traditional semiconductor fab houses need ultra pure water to do their manufacturing. And they're about trying to tune the water, so they're going to harvest rainwater off the roof, recycle it, purify it, and process it. And so they want to make it just good enough for the fab that they're actually trying to manufacture, which is like a low-cost polymer plastic material, flexible semiconductor material. So very innovative, and it's all about resource efficiency. So great project for OSM and open source tech. And the idea is to roll that out around the world once we've got the recipe right in the UK. So we've got one sensor there right now, and it's become the centre of everything. Basically, we lashed the sensor up, cable tied it to a pylon. It's still a building site, so you can imagine the builders are in and out all day long. I think they shut the site down once already because they were smashing up concrete and there was dust everywhere, and our alarms went off on the air quality, and they were like, "This is too bad, guys, get off site." And now they've got a temporary clean room set up. They're currently monitoring the ambient environment in the clean room, and it's just simple things like humidity that humidity is critical in a clean room. Obviously, air quality is critical. So the one sensor that we've got there is providing them a lot of useful insights, and actually it went down a few days ago because the gateway basically got unplugged, we lost internet, and with the phone rings, that it's becoming very important for them very quickly that they need real-time monitoring. They need that continuous monitoring and that feedback all the time to make sure the manufacturing is done with the right consistency.
Yeah, and also there are some health and safety aspects involved in that, because depending on the industry sector, they might be more relevant to have some of that.
Yeah. So what next? Well, we've got lots of things in the pipeline. We're working on some edge processing devices, which will be similar size to this, but it'll be Linux-based box with a lot more processing power. This is just a little STM microprocessor, so it can only do so much. So the next product will be an edge processor for things like vibration monitoring and maybe more sort of computational heavy applications like that, where you've got a lot of data to number crunch, get the results out, and it'll also have power over Ethernet and other communication types. We picked LoRaWAN, for this one, because LoRaWAN's used a lot in commercial and industrial premises, and it's very good long-range penetration. But we don't plan to just support LoRaWAN. So obviously, integrating what we've got into other business systems is quite important. So we're looking at how we do that with ERP and MRP type packages, things like Odoo, another open source package that companies run. Ultimately, we're trying to make manufacturing more sustainable and improve the efficiency of how businesses are operating, and very much focused on smart factories at the moment. But there's farming applications, there's smart cities, there's all sorts of applications that can use open source technology like this. So it's quite an exciting space to work in. And data-driven business models. So it's all about the data and then what you do with it. So we want to try and get more into the machine learning and the AI side of things, and actually start intelligently looking at that data and seeing what we can extract from it. Automatic report generation, that kind of thing. Which is, it sounds easy, but it's not. It's lots of people have tried it, and it's something we're very keen to explore and work on. So just finish off with some useful links there, and then we'll take some questions. So if you want to look at the hardware or the software, the firmware that runs on this, you can go to our GitHub pages. Feel free to contact us, drop me or my colleague Bruno here an email if you want to ask any more questions about what we're doing, what we're up to, or you want to get involved. Happy to take questions now from anyone that might have questions.
Thank you for your presentation, and I love the technology. I'm sure Chion Yura, who was speaking yesterday, the keynote yesterday, would be interested to see some of the research you did and you presented at the start of the presentation there. In the global open science hardware group that does a lot of monitoring devices, although not quite commercially yet, as you're doing, there's a big debate. Calling it open, does it help or hinder sales? Does the customer care whether it's open or not?
Well, it's a really good question, because when we started out on this journey, we were a little bit nervous, if I'm honest. We were worried about scaring customers off by being so transparent, so open. But actually what's happened is the open source sort of profile's been raised over the years, and we've been at this for about 8-9 years now. And all the customers that come to us have really embraced the fact that we are open. They've really bought into that, how transparent we are, and how we, of course, it's up to them whether they want to share the data with other orgs or, outside their organization, they want to do other open source projects. They're not all interested in that, of course, because they want to use it for their own commercial gain. But we haven't really had a problem with many roadblocks by being transparent, by being open. So, yeah.
So what's the business model around being open?
Well,
how does it affect your business model?
Yeah, very, very good question. So I think in some respects it's easier with hardware, because we sell tangible products, right? Hardware, someone's got to make it, someone's got to test it, someone's got to CE mark it and EMC test it, and we do all of that like it's any other product. And people want to buy just a product off the shelf. Now, with open hardware, there's lots of products which are just circuit boards. I think Arduino was mentioned earlier. There's the SparkFun, the D-Laser dead boards. They're all really cool, really good, useful things, but there's not actually that many companies selling a polished product that you can just buy. And we often say to customers, you can make it yourself. Of course, here's the schematics, here's the source code, go knock yourself out. Or do you want to buy it from us? And they're like, yeah, we'll buy it from you. We don't want to make it ourselves. Why would we? It's not our core business. Now, you're always going to get copycats. And I remember listening to a talk from, I think it was the CEO of SparkFun a few years ago. It was a TED talk. And he was saying, well, what you've got to do is just stay ahead of the game. You've got to just keep innovating and keep getting new products to market. And that's what we're doing all the time. You know, we're always trying to stay ahead, trying to build the brand as well and get people following us in what we're doing, and also build a community. I think the community is the hard part. That we're still working on the community engagement, but that will come, you know. So yeah, we sell the product, the hardware, and then we sell support, consultancy, just like any other business really that's doing this kind of thing.
Just a second. Let Sen get in, and then we'll get you the mic.
Hi there. Yeah, so I had a bit of a technical question. So obviously your sort of main goal is to proliferate, you know, open source hardware, which is commendable. But
Sure.
I had sort of a technical question because you're, I think it's like you're like a Raspberry Pi, like a hardware partner.
That's right. Yeah.
Something like that. And the Raspberry Pi is proprietary hardware. So I was wondering if there was a technical reason as to why you chose that over a more open source single board computer.
It's a good question. We're not wedded to Raspberry Pi at all, really. We when we started out in the early days, Raspberry Pi had a great community around them, like many open source products. It was a very low cost computer board, and we thought, actually, let's piggyback on what the community have already got. And when you look at Raspberry Pi, it's full of open source ecosystems. You know, there's lots of hardware, there's lots of plug-in boards, hats. Just because Raspberry Pi keep the IP on the core, it doesn't mean the rest of it isn't open, or some of the other aspects of it aren't open. So I think, you know, in an ideal world, of course, we'd adopt everything that's open and only open, but you've got to be pragmatic about it. And ultimately, we've got to make money as a company. We've got to put good designs together. And it was the support in the community that sort of led us down the Raspberry Pi route. And actually, they do open source their I/O boards and things now to try and improve adoption and get the community into what they're doing. So I don't really see it as a problem. We have looked at using, and we have in fact used other Linux processor boards, not just Raspberry Pi. But you know, for many people, it's a brand that you can see exactly what they're about. You know, people know of them, and that's partly the reason. Being brutally honest.
What the guy was saying there, you know, about being primed, companies being primed open, they've heard of Raspberry Pi, and that kind of gives them a warmer feeling.
Exactly, yeah. And when you're starting out, people don't know who you are, you know.
Yeah. Forget the chocolate cake.
Here, and then we'll get the gentleman in the center, please.
Yeah, great. Really interesting stuff. You work a lot with UK manufacturers, which is a sector we don't hear that much about these days. What's your impression of the health and the attitude of that sector? Does it feel like it's growing, shrinking? Is it exciting?
When you say UK, do you mean like factories producing stuff in the UK? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's quite exciting. I think as we walk around and look, and we do lots of site visits, you see all sorts of innovative things going on. And I think it gives me a buzz that there's still a lot in the UK happening, and actually things are coming back to the UK, like semiconductor manufacturing, which we really desperately need. So yeah, I think the future looks very bright for the UK, especially with more open source adoption. Yeah.
Thank you.
And especially today, we'll get all the sunshine.
Exactly.
So if you wouldn't mind the mic, because then it'll be captured as part of the stream and part of the session.
Is it on?
Yes.
Just to add on
Appreciate
to the question earlier about the open source and how the business works with that. The Innovate project that we've become a partner with Pragmatic, we would not have got that work and be on that project unless we were open source. That's been made clear to us by the CEO of the company. So we know we're on that project purely because we're prepared to open the data or our designs. They want to pass the data on to a variety of people, including AI people doing weather predictions. They're manufacturing their own nitrogen on site, so they're becoming a very eco-based system. And we're on there purely because it's open source. That's the... Sorry, go on.
I was just going to add to that, because a lot of them have been burnt by vendor lock-in. They're just so tired of being screwed over by being locked in. So you say you're not going to do that, and they're just like, oh, thank God. So it is actually, it helps sales.
Beautiful. All right. One final question, the morning session. Otherwise, we'll let you get. All right. So let's thank Tim and Bruno.
No problem.
Professor Gallotta.
Thanks.